Hello and welcome back to the She Gallery Show. Thank you for being with me. You are with me live on CAN TV on the She Gallery Show. And this is one of the first segments that we have you here with us live. Ordinarily, you are with us in a pre-recorded segment with a guest that is joining us via Zoom. That is post-COVID. And everybody now in the world is familiar with COVID-19 and some of these changes where we are being forced to use technology to communicate. And in today's segment, we are focusing on just that, on technology and our society and how this affects our mental health. May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and we are focusing on just that. Today, we are focusing on the mental health dilemma, the democracy dilemma, and the discrimination dilemma. These are three dilemmas that affect us greatly. I am not the first to hold this conversation. I want to say that I am one in very many that have taken note of what social media has done to our society. I want to start by saying, before COVID-19, we were all interacting via social media already. There have been some changes post-COVID-19 that have forced us to interact with each other. We are now working remotely, some of us. Some of us are now being forced to shop remotely, afraid to go out. Some of us have just gotten so comfortable that this has become a new way of living. And how is this affecting society? We want to hear your thoughts. You are with us today live. You can call us throughout this segment at 312-738-1060. My name is Dulce Maria Diaz. I am founder and director of Sharing His Energy Gallery. Why am I leading this conversation? Because I care. Who is She Gallery? Sharing His Energy Gallery. We are a nonprofit based from Chicago, and we focus on civic engagement through the arts. Those of you who have been with us since the beginning know that we started just with a simple dream, an actual dream. And you can learn more about that at sharinghisenergygallery.net. But today, I want to focus back on you and your mental health awareness and how this is affecting society. I want to say, for conversation starters, I want you to think about this. When you think about your computer or your computer, whether it be on your phone or on your laptop, think about your computer, your device. And we say, is this a tool that you are using? If something is a tool, it genuinely is just sitting there, just patiently waiting to be used. Think about that. If something is not a tool, then it's demanding things from you. Would even say that it is seducing you. It's manipulating you. It wants things from you. Do you think social media is a tool for you? How might you make it one? Think about that. Now let's focus back on the mental health dilemma. Why is social media... excuse me. I don't know if you could still hear me, but I can't hear you, so let me reconnect. Sorry. Hear me? Okay. So I don't know if you can still hear me. Okay, great. All right, so we will continue. Sorry about that. Technical problems. And so this happens. So let's go back to the mental health dilemma. Why is this a dilemma? How is this affecting our society and our families? When we think about the dilemma, the companies that connected the world and transformed how we consume information did so at a cost. The unintended consequences of exploding technologies are catching up with the use in the form of mental health. Let's take a look at this clip and learn a little bit more about the mental health dilemma.
They can't stop looking at social media.
Their brains have changed.
They become addicted.
And there's something very dangerous about that.
The number one problem, the number one psychiatric disorder among teenagers is anxiety. Typically, it's anxiety about needing to check in with social media.
There's another study that looked at fear of missing out, and it looked at kids who have high anxiety around missing out. Even though social media makes them more anxious, makes them more worried about missing out, they can't stop looking at it. That prefrontal cortex hasn't developed enough for them to be able to put it down, to say to themselves, it's not making me feel good.
The prefrontal cortex, this area of the brain that is involved in our cognitive control, our ability to process and direct our attention based on our goals, is the last part of our brain to develop.
This doesn't get completely myelinated until you're in your mid to late 20s.
So kids are getting these tools right when they have the least capability of actually controlling their behavior.
I think we can confidently say that it's changing the way that teens interact with each other, with peers, with the world, and that those changes in interactions lead to sort of changes in behaviors, changes in psychiatric and sort of mental health.
We should not be surprised. And it's not just because the culture changed. It's because their brains have changed.
They also get trained in instant gratification by these devices. And there's something very dangerous about that, because in real life, we don't get everything that we want instantly.
They are bombarding our teenagers and our young adults with so much that they become addicted to the continuous input of stimulus and information.
We know that there are many activities that are critical for our development. Face-to-face communication, physical activities, exposure to nature, and sleep. I would say that all of these are being threatened in some way by increasing access to information technology.
I think parents are in a really tough situation right now. I think because this tech has negative effects, they have to balance between trying to protect their kids, but also, let's face it, there's tremendous social pressure to use technology. And it's also incredibly important that children are technically literate. And I think there need to be more resources that help them make those decisions. And frankly, the companies need to be partially responsible, largely responsible, for ensuring that the use of these products is responsible.
All right. So, when we think about the mental health dilemma, they mentioned our children, our teens. Here's some fast check on how this is affecting our families. 50% of teens report feeling addicted to their phones, as do 27% of their parents. The average American child receives his or her first smartphone at the age of 10. 88% of teens who use social media have witnessed others being cruel online. Children who are cyberbullied are 3 times more likely to engage in suicidal ideation than non-bullied children. During one of our earliest seasons, we had on a very young guest. She was a teenager, and she focused on cyberbullying and how it affected her and how art helped her. That percentage of cyberbullying has increased tremendously since May 2018. I don't have the fact in front of me, but it was over 50%. It was like insane. And the suicidal rate had also increased tremendously since the bloom of certain social media platforms. These are things we can't really ignore. They're right in front of us, and they're affecting our families every single day. Now let's move on to the democracy dilemma. What is the democracy dilemma? Oh, I wanted to share this last quote on the mental health dilemma before we move on to the democracy dilemma. The mental health dilemma: addiction, anxiety, and depression. Platforms are designed to reward distraction and keep us hooked at the expense of our well-being to fuel their business. In the beginning of these social media platforms were made to unite the people, to stay in touch. And it quickly became a way for certain other industries to start dividing the people. So we're going to touch a little bit on that. Who is controlling these platforms? They've boomed, technology has boomed, but who's controlling them? Who's monitoring them? I remember when we were growing up, we'd have to watch movies that said, like, parental advisory. There was some human that was taking a look at these before they said, okay, it's okay for your kid to watch. And now it's up to you to say, hey, kid, it's okay for you to watch. But we've kind of lost a little bit of control. Have we? Let's take a look.
I think we're in a very, very dangerous moment.
Election integrity,
legal voter suppression,
radical indifference,
more tribalism,
foreign election interference.
You don't have a natural cognitive defense against this stuff. There are incredibly motivated groups of people with a particular agenda, and the social ecosystem has given them the tools to reach other people to spread that agenda. That can be anything from a terrorist organization reaching out to recruit, like we saw with ISIS, or the Internet Research Agency reaching out to exploit societal divisions, like we saw in the 2016 election.
As we saw in the 2016 election, governments are also increasingly figuring out we can actually use these social media platforms to manipulate public opinion to our own end, to spread disinformation, to spread propaganda, and to really gin up hatred sometimes against vulnerable populations or the political opposition or whatever it is.
If you think about presidential campaigns from years past, they used TV and they used, radio and other media that was the same for every person who heard or saw those advertisements. But if you're thinking about how advertising works on Facebook or Twitter or other social media, they can actually customize that ad to very small groups of people who all have, say, the same personality type. And that enabled campaigns to manipulate very small segments of the population to do very specific things, whether it was to vote for a particular candidate or to raise money or potentially even to not vote at all.
These campaigns are so well executed, so well done. You don't have a natural cognitive defense against this stuff. You just are going to take what you see credulously, and particularly if it appeals to your biases, which it should if they're doing their job targeting the right people with the right content, you're going to be receptive to it.
This is not a future society that is compatible with democracy, that is compatible with human freedom, that is compatible with the most elemental sense of human agency.
Democracy isn't simply the option to vote for candidate A or candidate B. It is being well informed about what the candidates actually stand for. That's what we're at risk of losing.
Having outside parties interfere in our election is just a horrible thing. Voting is the most basic building block of democracy. And if we don't have that, what do we have?
If we don't have that, what do we have? The democracy dilemma. Political polarization and divisiveness. Content that promotes outrage, deception, and conspiracy is promoted as a way to drive more engagement. Stronger ideological rifts make cooperation and compromise increasingly difficult and ultimately sabotage our democracy. Again, who is monitoring our platform? We had a president who was completely, I don't even need to repeat. We don't even need to go back in history, right? Let's move forward. We all know what happened. Fake news spread 6 times faster than accurate news on Twitter, and falsehoods are 70% more likely to be retweeted. The hashtag of countries with political disinformation campaigns on social media doubled in the past 2 years. Google search results can shift the voting preferences of undecided voters by 20% or more, up to 80% among some demographics. I could go on, but I want to move forward. Here's some additional fast checks on how social media is affecting our teachers and our students. Teens use entertainment screen media for an average of nearly 7.5 hours a day, not including the time they spend using screens for school or homework. As teens' time on social media specifically has gone up, so have their depression rate. One study found that between 2009 and 2017, rates of depression amongst kids ages 14 to 17 increased by more than 60%. That is the number that I was looking for earlier. Now let's move on to the discrimination dilemma. Let's take a look here. And again, we remind you that you are live with us, so you can feel free to give us a call, share your opinions. How has COVID affected you? How has social media affected you? What are your thoughts? What are your opinions? Hope I don't lose you guys. But if you don't have any thoughts, we will move forward and touch base on the discrimination dilemma. Thank you.
Algorithms are not objective.
AI and a lot of these emerging technologies are perpetuating bias.
They don't predict the future, they cause the future.
I spend a lot of my time thinking about bias, but that's just who I am, and also the lack of government understanding on these issues that result in the lack of regulation and laws to really help mitigate some of the problems that we're already seeing with AI.
Algorithms are not objective. Algorithms are optimized to some definition of success. It uses historical data to predict future success. People blindly believe that algorithms are inherently fair and objective, and partly because they believe in that fairness, they don't question the algorithm. And so when the algorithm ends up being as racist as the data that we put into it, it's perpetuating exactly the patterns that we wish that we could transcend.
Systems are ingesting tons of information without context, without the history, without even the political and economic and social implications. And so you have a greater likelihood of an AI system embedding those biases or even making them worse.
There are 4 categories of algorithms that I think are being misused and that could cause serious harm to society. The 4 categories are financial. These are algorithms that decide whether people get insurance and how much they pay, whether they get good credit cards, whether they get mortgages, whether they get housing. You go to a credit card website, you don't get information about credit cards. You get sized up and sussed out, and they show you the credit card they think you deserve. The second category is liberty related. How are you policed? How long do you go to prison? Do you get incarcerated awaiting trial? The third category is livelihood stuff. Your job. Do you get an interview for this job you've applied for? Do you get the job? Do you get a raise? What hours do you work?
One example that got a lot of media coverage was a hiring algorithm that disproportionately favored individuals whose names were Jared and played lacrosse, because the majority of individuals that performed well in that company had those two facts in common.
And then the fourth category is information itself. How do we get information? What do we believe? Political information in particular. All those things are algorithms now, and often they're unfair, and often they're illegal. But we have not figured out how to enforce our anti-discrimination laws. The dystopia that I worry about is that we don't put a stop to opaque, harmful algorithms. Hey, we profiled you from birth. We noticed that you grew up poor in a neighborhood where lots of people don't succeed, and we're going to predict that you're not going to succeed. And not only are we going to predict you're not going to succeed, we're going to make sure you don't succeed. So you're not going to get into a good college, you're not going to get a good job, you're not going to get a good loan, because that's what algorithms actually do. They don't predict the future, they cause the future.
Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed the clip and learned some new information about the way that these systems work and what is an algorithm and how algorithms kind of welcome anything goes. If it is a computer that is monitoring, then it's not a human and it doesn't know what's good for you, what's bad for you. It just knows what gives numbers. We're more than numbers. The discrimination dilemma. Algorithm bias and the application of hate. Algorithms are not equipped to detect hate speech, and the data harnessed by our online activity is used by institutions in ways that can harm and discriminate against marginalized communities. You learned during that clip just how that works. Was it alarming to you? We're here to educate. We're not here to try to believe in anything or to change the way that you live, but we do believe that it is important to know how these things work. What is the background behind all of the likes and these addictive platforms? Research has found that leading L models for processing hate speech were 1.5 times more likely to flag tweets as offensive or hateful when they were written by African Americans. 64% of the people who joined extremist groups on Facebook did so because their algorithms steered them there. Have you noticed that? You've noticed that. Until 2019, Facebook allowed advertisers to use discriminatory targets in ads. Those advertising jobs, housing, credit offers could choose to exclude people on their basis of gender, race, disability, and other characteristics. So let's talk a little bit about advertisers. Past check. 3/4 of Facebook users are unaware that it keeps lists of their personal interests, such as their political learnings, for advertisers. So when you're going through your feed, what's running through your feed aside from cute puppies? What's taken over? The cute cats. 50% of Americans who looked at their preferences on Facebook said they were uncomfortable with the company creating these lists about them. And 17% of Americans believe personalized ads are ethical. It is a personal opinion. Again, we are just here to share information because we've noticed that social media has changed our society. And today we were here to share with you how social media has affected our mental health. Post-COVID, we have been forced to stay indoors. We have been forced to communicate through platforms that are served via text. And again, we ask, who is monitoring these platforms? If it's algorithms, which are technically machines, then whose job is it? We are a society, and as a society, we have a responsibility to take care of each other, to listen to each other, to become human once again. And so we say, How can you help? How can you take apart? Everybody says, well, I can't change the world. No, you can't. Today I'm here leading a conversation. I'm one person of many having a conversation with you. And you're welcome to give me a call at 312-738-1060 and join this conversation. And if you're not comfortable giving us a call today, you can think about this within your families. And when you think about your interactions with your families, think about this. Do you notice a link between your use of certain technologies and how you feel or the quality of your relationships, especially during COVID-19? Have you noticed that you want to use your phone or your social media less? Should your family have rules around how and when you're using your devices? What are some ways you may try to disconnect or focus usage on meaningful connection? Again, we're focusing on mental health awareness. And there is something that many of us have now become familiar with that is called the social media detox. If there is too much information that is being thrown at you, then you can take a mental break and give yourself permission to detox away from social media. If you notice that there is something that is making you feel ill, you can choose not to look at that. It is all your choice. These platforms that we have in front of us are tools. And we go back to the beginning of our conversation. Who is in control of what? And at what point did we lose control? Have we lost control? How do we regain our control? How has COVID-19 affected our society? And now that we are regaining, we're building back our communities. People are starting to go back to work. Hopefully back to work. Physically, not behind a computer somewhere. I mean, even if that means traveling somewhere behind a computer, but you know what I mean. Not remotely. We're now interacting with other people. We can choose. We can choose. Because we always have a choice. And so today, we thank you for being with us. And we thank you for taking care of yourself and each other.